Ciao, hello everyone. My name is Stefano. I'm Italian and I teach Italian online and have a whole series of Italian lessons. Today, I'm going to share with you some tips to learn Italian or just any language faster. First, I'd like you to tell me if you can hear me and see me and say hello in the chat box. You can do that in Italian or in English, either way. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them during the live. Don't wait until the end. As soon as I see your question, I'll address it right away. It could be a question about how to learn Italian or how to learn languages in general, or even a specific question regarding something about the Italian language, like grammar, vocabulary. As long as it's relevant, I'll answer it. I'm doing this webinar because I'm often asked how to learn languages faster, how to use my lessons, and what you should focus when learning a language. So here we are. I do have a few tips to share with you, but since it's a live event, I warmly encourage you to ask your questions. So what I say is going to be relevant to you for sure. So if you come up with a question, type it in and I'll answer it right away. I start with I can introduce myself quickly. I'm a serial language learner. I just like learning languages. People call that a polyglot. And after years and years spent studying and learning languages, I came to the conclusion that we all learn languages. First, anyone can learn languages. There's no one who just can't. It's not you, it's your method. Second, it's never too late. Different people make progress at different paces, but you can achieve a certain level of fluency at any age, and there's no need to travel or live in the country that speaks that language, especially now with the internet. And regarding how we learn languages, I came to the conclusion that we learn by mimicking, by listening and repeating the speaker. That's what you did when you were a baby. Your parents, other people around you would talk to you, and you would react somehow as you could. So if you wanted water and people were pointing at this, water, water, and then you were thirsty, and you tried to say, water, and then that's how you learn water. There are other ways to study languages, namely through grammar rules. That's how most of you, myself, studied languages in school. And grammar rules, translation, reading, maybe some writing, but little speaking or listening. Or if you listen, then there's no time to speak because there are just too many students in the class. And so you end up understanding the language to a certain extent, but you can't speak. You can't come up with words in a real conversation. That's common, and it's not your fault. It's the method. That's why I made my own Italian lessons and called them Repeticum. That means repeat after me. You are literally forced to repeat what you hear. You can't go through a lesson without uttering a word, as you can do with just any language app, any fancy, popular, showy language app. When you type your way quietly through the lesson, you never say a word. If you're disciplined enough, that's my tip to use to make the most out of any language learning resource, is to read aloud everything you see, repeat everything you hear. Even when you're writing, read it aloud. If you're watching a video, try to speak along with the speaker. That's called shadowing. Because everything that goes through speech gives you a deeper stimulus, deeper impression inside your brain, and you retain information better. Especially if your ultimate goal is to communicate with people, and usually that's by speaking with them. It makes sense that you should be practicing speaking if you want to speak with people. But most language learners, their study time is skewed towards grammar and translation. So they kind of know the rules and feel safe about it because I know the rule and I got so many points on my language app. And then when you have a native speaker in front of you, you just don't know what to say. So far, this was my number one. Well, it's already a couple of tips. If you have any questions, type them in the chat box and I'll answer them right away. I'd like to know, you listening, if you already started learning Italian and if you are already using my lessons. Type it in the chat box. You can type in Italian to show off your proficiency. And if you're curious, here you find the course I'm talking about. There are two sets of lessons. One is called Repeticum, repeat after me. It's a whole course of 215 audio lessons, each on a specific grammar pattern or important word that you use often. And each lesson is made up of 30 sentences, both in English and Italian. And you just learn by listening and repeating those sentences. They're arranged in a way that you proceed through a natural learning path from simple grammar patterns to more advanced ones. And you do all this by actually using the language, not reading about it, not studying it. Grammar rules are not explicitly taught. I do have grammar notes, but they come after the lesson, and only if you want to look at them. Me personally, when I learn a language, I don't study grammar, like specifically, show me the rules. I just don't. I book a lesson on Skype with a native speaker and I start talking. If they're good enough to lead the conversation, even with a total beginner, I will be speaking that language from day one. And you can do it. Just you shouldn't be too shy. Don't feel embarrassed if you make mistakes, because that's how we learn. I make mistakes all the time, and that's totally normal. And by the way, if you're studying, if it's self-study, let's say you take an audio lesson, you speak 30 minutes every day, you make mistakes all the time, but no one is listening, so there's no need to feel embarrassed. That's also the advantage of studying by yourself. I'd like to hear if you're alive, your study history in Italian or any other language. Type it in the chat box. I'm curious to see what kind of audience I have. Maybe I can give you more specific tips. Feel free to introduce yourself, where you're from, what languages you speak, how long you studied Italian, and how. I'm curious if you ever used other resources, or if you're using my own ones, and how you like them. So far I talked about the first set of lessons, the repeat after me, Repeticum. Then these sentences are useful per se. They are designed specifically for the Italian language and with traveler situations in mind, like at the station, at the hotel, at the restaurant, or daily conversation, even arguing a bit, because Italians do that. And so it's already useful material. It's not like textbook sentences, but people also want to be exposed to real world material, and that's why I made a collection of bilingual readings with slow audio. So there's Italian text, Italian script, then the English translation, and the Italian audio, spoken relatively slow, not too slow that it sounds unnatural, because you should get used to the real thing. But you can still adjust the playback speed, just in case. Oh, we have Annette. Hello. Ciao, Annette. On and off. Annette has been learning on and off for years. She wants to do it now. Annette has a half Italian boyfriend. His family speak Italian when they get together. Oh, so you have an excellent motivation and plenty of chances to practice. So all you need is the right material, a bit of discipline, and they speak very fast. Yes, as when you're new at a language, everybody speaks fast. But indeed, in some cultures, languages, people do speak faster on average. For example, they're Calabrese. Oh, maybe they also have an accent, a regional accent. They have a strong regional accent there. Maybe I myself wouldn't be able to understand. And I'm in Japan now. You can see from the interior, maybe. And there's a Japanese table there. And Japanese people are very polite, considerate, and they care a lot about the listener. And they speak relatively slowly so that they can check the feelings of the listener. It's a cultural thing, but as a matter of fact, they do speak slower and clearly, and they wait between reactions. so you rarely end up talking over each other. So that's more learner friendly. With Italian, it's not that obvious. It also depends on regions. In the south, people are more passionate, you say, and so you tend to talk over each other. They do. Father is from north of Italy, so a mix. Annette is in Australia. Good. Italy. Well, Italy is a young country, and it didn't exist until 160 years ago. And before that, each region was an independent country. Even some towns were independent countries, and they had their own languages or dialects, but like strong, very strong. That they couldn't understand each other. That's still the case with older generation and in rural areas. But generally speaking, you can expect to understand each other. And they do talk over each other, yes. I don't do that. I'm not very Italian, I guess. Or maybe because I spent so much time abroad, especially in Japan. And then especially after the war, with television, the Italian language was standardized. People watched programs in the same language, and now, yes, you can say we do speak Italian, but regional accents are still strong, especially in the deep north, the deep south, and islands. I do have an Italian accent in English, but I don't have a regional accent in Italian. And when I'm in Italy, people either think I'm a foreigner or they just can't tell where I'm from. That's also, I do the recordings of my audio course, at least Repeticum, listen with me. That's me reading the sentences. That's funny. What, did they think I'm a foreigner? Yes. Oh, I think I would think myself that I'm a foreigner because I don't behave, think the same way. I spent many years abroad. And good. Thank you. And as for the tips, I was talking about the real world material. So you would be tempted to go and watch a movie, listen to music, watch the news, read a newspaper. But if you're a beginner, that's just beyond your level. And a material to be useful should be understandable about 60 to 70, 80%. That's a good rule of thumb. And if it's real world material, it's just too difficult. And that's why the stories, the readings on my website are simplified down to different levels, from total beginners all the way to advanced level. And there's also a link to the original source, but that's a good compromise between keeping it real and keeping it understandable and useful at any level. Then, well, it's another story when you face your Italian family and they start speaking with an accent, or they use slang. Well, you can find everything in a lesson or in a course, but if your brain is trained to listen and mimic, then you can absorb new information better and also infer based on what you heard so far in the lessons. ideally, you should be speaking with people. It takes time and money. If you're busy, maybe it's difficult to find the right schedule for you, and well, paying a professional teacher is much more expensive than paying for a monthly subscription, for example, on my website. But well, if you do have time and money, go from day one, speak with someone. I find teachers on italki, I think that's how you pronounce it, just in case. And I also take lessons there. I teach Italian and take lessons, other languages. I strongly recommend it. Also, doing live lessons and self-study with my audio lessons, for example, it's a good balance because you keep yourself busy every day, and you also put in practice what you heard in the lessons. Oh, hello, Leticia. Leticia is in the Philippines, and she's planning to buy a property in Tuscany. Oh. That's my region. I'm from Tuscany. It's a beautiful place. Yes, they often make movies there because it's just like a postcard. Yeah. And in Tuscany, they do have a regional accent, but Tuscany is considered to be the origin, the cradle of the Italian language, and it's also a good place to learn Italian because it's quite close to the standard language. But just in case, there's no place in Italy where people speak standard Italian. Standard Italian was a literary fiction, and then it spread to the population, but there's not one place where people speak perfect, standard, neutral Italian. People learned it, like, for example, speakers for advertisement, or actors, they learn it, but that's not people. For example, people guess that if you go to the capital, they speak proper, neutral, standard Italian. No, that's not the case. Don't, well, unless you have a specific reason, but I don't recommend you learn the Roman accent. And Jin Xia, I think I saw your name on my website. Jin Xia. What do you think of Italian textbook Nuovo Espresso? Why you feel like design your teaching material as using existing textbooks? Why I made my own material instead of using existing textbooks? Well, first, regarding the textbook, I really don't know because I barely use textbooks, even when I teach. It's called Progetto Italiano. It's quite old. Maybe I should change it, but I use it so little that it doesn't really matter. I only use the, when I do an Italian lesson, if I do use the textbook, is to read the conversations, the dialogues together, and that's all. I don't use the drills, the exercises, even the grammar rules. I don't explain them. So virtually any textbook would do. No, but I don't know about the textbook. And why I made my own one? Well, first you are comparing my own material with the textbooks. A textbook feels good because you have it in your hands and you feel that everything you need, it's there and it's organized, but it's there, it's that on the pages. You can't talk with your textbook. There's also a lot of stuff in textbooks that just you don't need. I don't know why they put it there, just to make volume, I guess. And if you take it as one element, one ingredient in your language diet that you take every day, then yes, you as a reference, you can take a look at some grammar patterns and then go with find a native speaker and put it into practice. Yes, but as me as a learner myself, I don't use text. I don't use any written material at all now. I only use audio courses. I'm a big fan of Pimsleur, and I also use Glossica. They're all audio courses. I don't remember last time I used a textbook, but it was many years ago. Because now with the computers and the internet, I'm not telling you that then you should rush to play with just any app that makes it fun but doesn't teach you anything, because that's the opposite extreme. But since the most important and at the same time the most overlooked aspect, skill in language learning is speaking, and textbooks are not the ideal tool or material to cover it. You should be speaking with someone or speaking along an audio course. So that's why I didn't make a textbook and I made an audio course. There are some audio courses, so you could the comparison would be more correct. Why my own material and not an existing audio course? And Pimsleur has an Italian audio course. Glossica, well, the old version had I had a downloadable MP3 version. Now they turned it into an app. They both have good aspects, but also many flaws. Pimsleur is overly formal. You sound like a businessman, and like old-fashioned businessman. And that doesn't. For example, you start with the formal lei. In Italian, you say you say tu informally, or lei formally, and you start right away with lei. That's grammatically that's confusing because you are using she when you mean you, and also in real life you rarely use it unless you really want to use it for work. But even for work, we're becoming more and more informal. And for Glossica, Glossica used to, well, actually my course is based on the old version of Glossica. And there were many flaws in the sentences. I guess they fixed them now in the app, but the speaker had a regional accent. One speaker couldn't even roll their R's. And many sentences are weird or too long. And now they turn it into an app because it's more fashionable. And then they added features, as it often happens with learning apps. They added features on features, and now the speaking part is being diluted inside many other things that I don't feel the need for. So it's not a tool for practicing speaking anymore. Language apps end up resembling each other, and they lose the focus on speaking. That's why I'm not adding fancy features on my website. How long will it take your student to get to B1 level? 30 minutes every day. It depends on many things. Previous study history, so other languages, if they're bilingual, for example. If they, well, also age. And then let's say you start from scratch, 30 minutes. 30 minutes is not much. It's not zero, so you do make progress. I would recommend 1 hour, but you can achieve something with 30 minutes a day. It would take B1 anything from 6 to 12 months, maybe more, towards 12 months. But some people learn faster, some people take more time. Also, age plays a big role. It also depends how you study, because if you study 1 hour in class in a group lesson, it works worse than 1 hour one-on-one. If you take an audio lesson, you speak all the time. That's more useful than 1 hour spent passively reading or studying grammar rules. What's my audio course called? My audio course is called Repeticum, and you find it on my website. There's a 7-day free trial, so there's nothing to lose. Imagine me say it's gonna finish. Don't worry. You find it on the website. There's a 7-day free trial. Get full access to both Repeticum, repeat after me. That's the audio course. You could call it a grammar course in the sense that you do learn grammar patterns, but there are no explanations because you learn by listening and mimicking. But that's the kind of structure course. And then there's also a collection of bilingual readings. As a total beginners, that can be a bit intimidating, but they are simplified. And that's a way to be exposed to real world material. It's like you can take one lesson of from each collection every day. That's a good pace. And don't worry if it's too difficult. You can repeat the lesson the day after, or move forward a few days and then go back, and you'll feel that it's already easy. Well, this time is flying. I'm already happy with this 30 minutes. If I had the chance to share my tips, I also got some nice questions for you. Thank you. If you have any one last question, this is the chance. This is your chance. I'll see you on Fluent Simple, my website, when you can post questions on every under every lesson. There's a field to leave comments and questions, and I'll personally answer them. How long it takes you to study Japanese to fluent level? Is Japanese more difficult or Mandarin? Yeah, they're both difficult. They have different points that are difficult. I learned them in different ways. Japanese, like I lived in Japan. I did university here in Japanese. My major was not Japanese, but I did study everything in Japanese. And I had like real life for a few years here. So that's ideal. And it took me fluent. It depends how you say fluent. Let's say B2, upper intermediate. After 1 year in Japan, and before that I had studied 1-2 years, but in a more primitive way, because that was my first the first language that I studied independently. I wasn't really a serial learner at that time. It took me you could say 3 years, let's say. Now it would take a bit less. Well, first because I know similar language, but also because I was studying in a better way. And is Japanese more difficult or Mandarin more difficult? Mandarin pronunciation is more difficult. Writing characters are simplified, but on the other hand, you don't have any reference alternative as in Japanese, because Japanese also have a syllabic. You could call it an alphabet. It's ABC. It's not ABC, but it's aka, basa. And then Japanese honorific language is more difficult. There's a complex structure. There's a cultural thing that shows in the language. So it's very complicated to be polite in every situation. But pronunciation is easier. Grammar, Chinese grammar is virtually non-existent. You put one word, one sign after the other. Japanese grammar is less complicated than in Latin languages, but it's totally different. So there are different aspects. They're both difficult. Age doesn't mean the older, the harder it is. Yes, I'm still relatively young, so I can tell, but I can tell from my students that generally speaking, yes, it takes more time with age. Thank you, Jinxia. Thank you, Annette. And thank you, everybody else. See you. I don't know when the next live will be because there's no schedule, but I'm always on Fluent Simple. If you ask a question there, you're welcome to join. There's a 7-day free trial, and I'm always there to answer your questions. Bye. Ciao.